Hold still, brother. This might save you. It hurts.
The dessert did not forgive weakness. It stripped the breath from a body, cracked lips until they bled, and pulled the last strength from the bones of anyone foolish enough to fall. The sun leaned hard over the red stone, and the wind carried dust like a warning. She lay there where the canyon narrowed, half in shade, half in fire, her breath thin and uneven, eyes fluttering like a bird trapped between sleep and death. "Make me swallow slowly," she said, her voice barely more than air. The words trembled as they left her mouth, not from fear, but from the effort it took to stay awake. The hunter crouched beside her, boots planted firm in the sand, as if the earth itself might give way. His hands were steady, though his jaw was set tight. He had crossed bad country before, followed wounded men and dying animals through heat and blood, but this was different. This was not a trail. This was a life slipping through his fingers. "Stay awake," he whispered, close enough that she could hear him even as the wind rose. "I'm here. Don't let go now." His name was Flint Crow, a man shaped by mountains and long miles. He carried the marks of a frontier life and the scars along his knuckles, and the calm in his eyes when danger stood near. He had been raised on dry ground and hard rules, taught that survival came from patience and resolve. He knew how fast a person could fade when the body gave up. He would not let that happen here. He tipped the canteen, letting a single drop touch her lips. Not more. Never more. Water could save or kill when a body was weak. She tried to swallow and failed, her throat refusing to work, panic flickering across her dirt-streaked face. Her hands twitched, fingers clawing weakly at his sleeve. "I can't," she breathed. "You can," Flint said, not raising his voice. "Slow, like I showed you. One breath, then swallow." Her name was Alara Reed, though the desert had already tried to take it from her. She had not been meant for this place, not born to it the way he had been. Her skin was pale beneath the dust, her dark hair matted with sweat, her clothes torn from the fall she barely remembered. She had come west chasing a promise that never waited for the weak. Land, freedom, a future she could claim without bowing to anyone. Now she lay broken between stone and sky, wondering if that promise had been a lie. The drop slid past her lips. This time her throat worked. She swallowed, a small sound, but enough to make Flint release a breath he had been holding too long. "That's it," he said. "You're doing fine." The canyon stretched quiet around them, too quiet. Flint did not like quiet. It meant eyes watching or time running out. His horse stood a short distance away, reins dragging, ears twitching at every sound. He had found Alara by accident, or maybe by fate, lying where the sun would have finished her by nightfall. No tracks led to her, except her own, scuffed and broken. Like she had been running from something that never showed itself. "Why are you here?" she asked, eyes opening just enough to find his face. He hesitated. The truth was simple and heavy. "I was tracking sign," he said. "Came across you instead." Her lips curved into something like a smile, though pain quickly erased it. "Figure," she murmured. "Always lost." Flint watched her closely, the way he watched a wounded animal. He noted the shallow breathing, the way her hand shook when she tried to lift it, the faint blue tinge to her lips that made his chest tighten. She had lost blood. She was overheated. And there was something else, something he could not yet name, that made her drift even as he spoke. He brushed her hair back, gentle as he could be. "Ilara," he said, using her name to anchor her. "Listen to me. You sleep now, you might not wake. You hear me?" She nodded, though her eyes slipped away again. "Just tired," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you stay with me." He remembered another day, years back, when he had knelt in the dust beside his younger brother, pressing a hand to a chest that would not rise. He remembered the helpless rage, the way the world had gone silent afterward. He would not relive that moment here. Not again. Flint tore a strip from his own shirt and dampened it, laying it across her forehead. He shaded her face with his body, blocking the worst of the sun. Time mattered now. Distance mattered. He could not move her fast without risking more damage, but he could not stay either. The desert did not care about careful choices. Ilara's eyes opened again, sharper this time. Fear lived there now, raw and honest. "If I fall asleep," she said, "don't leave me." "I won't," Flint said. "Not going anywhere." Her fingers tightened around his wrist, surprising him with the strength of it. "Promise. I promise." The words settled heavy between them, binding more than just the moment. Flint did not give promises lightly. Out here, a promise could cost a life. The wind shifted, carrying a sound that made his head lift, hooves, distant but real, not his horse. Another rider, or more than one? He scanned the ridge above the canyon, eyes narrowing. Trouble had a way of finding the weak. And Ilara was weak in every way that mattered right now. "Flint," she said, sensing the change in him. "What is it?" "Nothing you need to worry about," he answered, though his hand slid instinctively toward the knife at his belt. The hooves came again, closer this time. Flint's mind raced. If someone had been following her, if she had run from men who did not care whether she lived or died, then stopping here had made them easy targets. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Stay with me," he said. "No matter what happens, you keep breathing. You keep swallowing when I tell you." She nodded, trusting him without knowing why. Clinging to his voice as the world tilted, Flint looked once more toward the ridge, jaw tightening. Whatever was coming, he would face it standing. He adjusted his grip on the canteen, readying another careful drop for her lips. Knowing that the next moments would decide everything, the desert held its breath. And so did he. The sound of hooves did not fade. It circled, slow and measured, as if whoever rode above knew patience well. Flint tilted the canteen again, letting another careful drop touch Ilara's mouth. She swallowed, slower this time, her throat working hard. Sweat traced a clean line through the dust on her cheek. He kept his body between her and the ridge, a wall of bone and resolve. While his eyes never stopped moving, Ilara's gaze followed his, though her head barely shifted. "They followed me," she said. The words scraped out of her like gravel. "I knew they would." "Who?" Flint asked, keeping his voice even. She closed her eyes for a breath, then forced them open again. "Men who think land belongs to the loudest gun. They came to the claim with smiles and papers. When I said no, the smiles left." Flint felt a cold settle in his chest. He had seen men like that from one end of the territory to the other. They moved with money behind them, and violence close at hand, and they never accepted refusal from a woman alone. "How many?" he asked. "3," she said. "Maybe 4. The hooves scraped stone again. "1 rider, at least. Maybe more hanging back." Flint weighed the ground around him. The canyon walls cut narrow, offering cover, but also trapping sound. His horse snorted softly, sensing the tension. Flint reached up and looped the reins around a scrub root. Keeping the animal close without drawing attention, Ilara's hand slipped from his wrist and fell limp at her side. Panic flared sharp in him. He leaned in close enough that she could feel his breath. "Ilara," he said, "stay here with me. You hear the wind. You hear my voice?" "I'm here," she murmured, though her eyes drifted again. Flint spoke to her then, not to fill silence, but to anchor her to the world. He told her about the mountains, north of the canyon, where the air cut cold even in summer. He told her about the way dawn looked when it broke over the flats, honest and unforgiving. He told her anything that might keep her mind awake and her breathing steady between his words. She gave him pieces of herself. She spoke of a river town far east, where her father had taught her to read maps and numbers because he believed a woman should know both. She spoke of the day she signed the claim, ink shaking in her hand, heart steady. She spoke of riding out alone, not because she had no one, because she refused to wait for permission. "I thought freedom would feel lighter," she said. "Turns out it weighs plenty." Flint almost smiled at that, but the sound of hooves cut the thought short. A shadow crossed the ridgeline. A man leaned in his saddle, scanning below. Flint went still, becoming rock and dust. He eased Ilara's head closer to his chest, shielding her face with his shoulder. The rider above spat into the sand. "You see anything?" a voice called, rough and careless. Flint held his breath. The canyon answered with silence. "Could have sworn she came this way," the man said. Another voice joined him, lower-edged with impatience. "She's hurt. She won't be far." Lara's fingers twitched against Flint's ribs. He felt it, a plea and a warning in one. He leaned down, his mouth near her ear. "Do not move," he whispered. "No matter what you hear?" The men talked among themselves, words lost to distance and wind. Flint counted seconds, counted heartbeats. He knew he could fight one man on that ridge if it came to it. 2 would stretch him. More would end this badly for all of them. A pebble skittered down the slope, then another. The riders were moving closer, testing paths. Flint slid his knife free an inch, just enough to feel the familiar weight. His other hand rested light on Alara's shoulder, steady and grounding. A memory pressed in, uninvited. A winter long ago, when Flint had watched his mother stand against men who wanted her land. She had stood tall, voice calm, knowing full well they might kill her for it. They left that day, but the cost came later, quieter. Flint learned then that courage did not always win, but it always mattered. Alara stirred. "Flint," she breathed. "If they find us, they won't," he said, though he did not know if it was true. "And if they do, you stay low and keep breathing. That's your fight right now." The riders reached a shelf above the canyon floor. Flint could hear leather creak, the dull thud of boots hitting stone. One man laughed, sharp and wrong. "There," he said. "See the horse." Flint's jaw tightened. He shifted, pulling his hat lower, angling his body so his silhouette broke apart against the rocks. He reached for a stone, flicked it hard toward the opposite wall. It cracked loud, drawing the eye away. "What was that?" a voice snapped. "Rockfall," another said. "This place is full of it." They argued, low and heated. Flint took the chance. He slid the canteen back into his pack and eased a small bundle free. Herbs crushed and wrapped in cloth. His mother's doing, not his. He dampened it and touched it to Alara's lips, letting the bitter scent wake her senses. She grimaced, then swallowed. Her eyes opened wider, focus sharpening just enough to meet his. "You're stubborn," she said faintly. "So they tell me." Above them, boots scraped again, closer now. Flint knew they were running out of room to hide. He whispered a plan to Alara, simple and clear. She nodded once, trusting him with a life she barely felt inside her body. A man's shadow stretched long down the rock face. "Hunter," a voice called. "We know you're down there." Flint did not answer. Silence could be a weapon. "We don't want trouble," the man went on, though his tone said the opposite. "Just the woman. She's ours." Flint rose slowly, just enough for his head to clear the rocks. His voice carried calm and iron. "No one belongs to you." A pause followed, heavy and dangerous. Then laughter, sharp as a blade. "You're outnumbered," the man said. "Maybe," Flint replied, "but you're on bad ground." The wind rose, dust lifting between them. Flint's hand stayed steady at his side, knife hidden, body ready. Below him, Alara lay quiet, breath shallow but present, fingers curled around the fabric of his coat as if it were the last solid thing in the world. The riders shifted, weighing risk against reward. Flint watched their eyes, their posture, reading them the way he read tracks in sand. One step wrong, and everything would break loose. Last chance, the man called Flint did not move. He did not speak. He stood there, a lone figure against stone and sky, daring the desert to choose, and somewhere deep in the canyon, Alara's breath caught, then steadied. As the moment stretched thin enough to snap, the wind carried grit into Flint's eyes, but he did not blink. He held the ridgeline with his stare, measuring the men above him by the way they shifted their weight and rested their hands too close to their weapons. Men who expected things to go their way always stood like that, loose, careless, certain. Flint knew certainty could kill quicker than fear, Elara's breathing grew uneven again. He felt it against his ribs, faint and fast. He crouched, just enough to shield her with his body, while keeping his head high, letting the riders believe his attention stayed fixed on them alone. His hand brushed her shoulder, a silent signal. "Stay with me. You're making this harder than it needs to be," one of the men called. His voice carried the tone of someone used to being obeyed. "We'll take her and be gone." Flint let a beat pass before answering. "You'll turn around," he said, "and you'll leave this canyon." Another laugh followed, but this one sounded thinner. The men shifted again, glancing at the narrowing walls, the drop-offs, shadows where a man could disappear and strike from nowhere. Flint had chosen this ground without choosing it at all. The canyon favored those who understood it. Elara stirred, her fingers tightening in his coat. "Flint," she whispered. "They won't stop." "I know," he said softly, "but you stay awake." She swallowed hard, forcing air into her lungs. Pain cut through her face, sharp and brief, then faded into something duller. "If I don't make it," she said, words breaking, "don't let them take the land." "You're going to make it," Flint said, "and no one is taking anything from you." Above them, a rider dismounted. Boots scraped stone as he started down a narrow path. Flint's muscles coiled, every sense sharpening. One man coming down meant the others would cover him. A test. Flint slid his knife fully free now, the blade catching no light. The man descended slowly, careful but confident. He carried a rifle slung low and a smile that did not belong in this place. "You look tired, Hunter," he called. "Been a long day." Flint did not answer. He shifted his stance, placing one foot where it could push off hard if needed. The man came closer, close enough now that Flint could see the dust on his boots, the faint scar along his jaw. Close enough to smell tobacco. Behind Flint, Elara coughed, a dry, painful sound. The man's eyes flicked down, sharp with recognition. "There she is," he said. "Told you she wouldn't get far." Flint moved then, quick and sudden, stepping sideways and vanishing into shadow. The man cursed, swinging his rifle up too late. Flint struck hard and fast, the butt of his knife catching the man's wrist. The rifle clattered against stone. The sound echoed, loud as a gunshot. Shouts rang out from above. Flint grabbed the man, dragged him back into the shade, pressing the blade close enough to feel breath hitch. "Call them off," Flint said, voice low and deadly calm. The man laughed, though fear had crept into it now. "You won't cut me," he said. "You're too busy playing hero." Flint leaned in, letting the man see his eyes. "You don't know me." Before the man could answer, a shot cracked against the canyon wall, stone exploding inches from Flint's head. Flint shoved the man away, sending him sprawling, and dropped low as another shot followed. Dust filled the air. Flint crawled back to Elara, heart pounding, mind racing. "Can you move?" he asked. She shook her head, tears streaking clean lines down her face. "I'm trying, I know," he said. "Listen to me. We're going to change positions. When I say move, you crawl toward the rock face. Slow, stay low." The riders above spread out, boots and voices everywhere now. They were done talking. Flint felt the weight of it settle in his chest. This was the moment when everything could go wrong. He glanced at his horse, still tied, head tossing, eyes wide. If he could get Elara onto the saddle, even for a moment, he might have a chance. But lifting her under fire would be a gamble he might not get twice. "Flint," Elara said, her voice stronger now, fear burning through the weakness. "You can leave me. I won't blame you." He met her gaze, steady and fierce. "I'm not leaving." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Flint pressed his body over hers, shielding her as stone fragments rained down. He felt one cut his arm, sharp and hot, but he ignored it. Pain meant he was still standing. The men shouted orders to one another. One moved along the ridge to flank, another stayed high, watching for movement. Flint counted them again. 3 for sure. Maybe a fourth, hanging back with the horses. The canyon seemed to close in, heat and dust thicken the air. Elara's breath rasped, but it stayed steady. She clung to Flint now, fingers digging in as if he were the ground itself. Flint reached into his pack and pulled free a small mirror, cracked at the edge. He angled it just enough to catch the ridge. Reflections moved. One man creeping down, another lining up a shot. Flint waited. Timing mattered more than strength. When the next shot came, Flint rolled, dragging Alara with him just far enough to avoid it. He shouted then, a sharp, wild sound that echoed through the canyon. His horse reared, breaking the reins loose. The animal bolted, thundering past the riders' horses, chaos exploding above. Men cursed and scrambled. One turned to grab his mount, another fired wildly. Flint seized the moment. He hauled Alara up, every muscle screaming and half-carried. Half-dragged her toward the rock face. She cried out, pain tearing from her throat, but she did not stop moving. "I'm awake," she gasped. "I'm awake." "I know," Flint said, breath ragged. "Keep going." They reached the base of the wall, just as boots thundered down behind them. Flint turned, knife flashing, meeting the first man head-on. The clash was brutal and close, breath and sweat and stone. Flint fought with everything he had, not for land or pride, but for the woman crouched behind him, alive because she refused to let go. Alara pressed her back to the rock, heart hammering, watching Flint move like a force of nature. Blood and dust streaking his arms. She felt fear rise, sharp and cold, but beneath it burned something stronger. Trust. A man fell. Another stepped in. Shots cracked, too close, too loud. The canyon roared with it. Flint staggered back a step, breath tearing from his chest. He planted his feet, lifting his blade again as the riders closed in. The moment stretched tight as wire above them. Thunder rolled low across the sky, distant but real. A storm was coming, fast and sudden, the kind that could change everything. Flint glanced once at Alara, her eyes locked on his. Fierce and alive. "Stay with me," he said. She nodded, gripping the rock. Refusing to fade, the storm wind surged through the canyon, dust spiraling high. As the men advanced, and the world tipped toward its breaking point, the storm broke like a held breath finally released. Wind tore through the canyon, rain slashing sideways, turning dust into mud and confusion into cover. Thunder rolled so close, it felt like the sky splitting open. The riders faltered, shouting to one another, their careful plans washed away by noise and fear. Flint used the moment without thinking. He stepped back, drawing them toward the narrowest choke of stone where numbers meant less and footing meant everything. A man slipped on wet rock and went down hard, scrambling to rise. Another swore as his shot went wide, the sound swallowed by thunder. Flint did not chase. He did not need to. The canyon and the storm did the rest. One by one, the riders pulled back, calling to each other, choosing retreat over risk. Their horses screamed and scattered, and soon the only sounds left were rain, thunder, Flint's own breathing. When it was over, it felt unreal. The canyon emptied as quickly as it had filled. Flint stood there for a long moment, blade lowered, body shaking now that the danger had passed. He turned to Alara, heart pounding with a different fear. She was still crouched against the rock. Soaked hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and bright. She was breathing, steady, alive. "It's done," Flint said, voice rough. "They're gone." Her shoulders sagged. She laughed once, a small broken sound that turned into tears. Flint knelt beside her, careful now, every movement gentle. He checked her wound again, hands practiced, calm returning with purpose. The bleeding had slowed. The color in her face was better. Not good, but better. "You stayed awake," he said. She nodded. "You wouldn't let me sleep." That was the idea. The storm moved on as fast as it had come, leaving the canyon washed clean and quiet. Sunlight crept back in, pale and cool. Flint eased Alara onto his horse, tying her in steady so she would not slip. She protested weakly, pride flaring even now, but he shook his head. "Save your strength," he said. "You've got a ride ahead." They moved slowly out of the canyon, Flint leading, watching every step. The land opened up, wide and breathing, as if nothing had happened at all. By the time they reached a small line cabin near the creek, Ilara was fading again, but not slipping. She stayed with him, eyes opening whenever he spoke. Flint tended her there, using what he had and what he knew. He cleaned the wound, bound it firm, kept her warm, and fed her water a drop at a time. He spoke to her when she drifted, grounding her in sound and presence. Night came quiet and clear, stars sharp overhead. Ilara woke near dawn. Pain greeted her, honest and strong, but so did life. She lay still, listening to the creek, the soft crackle of a fire. Flint sat nearby, cleaning his knife, movements slow with exhaustion. "You didn't leave," she said. He looked up. "Told you I wouldn't." She swallowed, tears shining again but not falling. "They won't come back," she said, more question than statement. "They won't," Flint said. "Word will travel. Men like that don't like being remembered for losing." Days passed. Ilara healed the way strong people do, slow but sure. She learned the shape of the cabin, the sound of Flint's steps, the way he watched the land even when resting. She learned he had chosen a life that kept him moving, not because he could not settle, but because he had not found reason enough to stop. On the 5th day, she stood outside, leaning on the doorframe. Feeling sun on her face, Flint watched her closely, ready to catch her if she wavered. She did not. "I need to go back," she said. "To the claim?" Flint nodded. "I figured." They rode together this time, side by side. When they reached her land, it looked the same as she had left it, raw and full of promise. No men waited there, no guns. Just wind and open ground. Eller dismounted slowly, taking it in. She turned to Flint. "You don't have to stay." "I know," he said. She held his gaze, steady now. "But you could." Considered the land, the cabin she planned to build, the way she stood taller than when he first found her. He thought of the canyon and the promise he had made. He thought of how freedom weighed plenty, on how sometimes that weight was meant to be shared. "I could," he said. They built the cabin together. Not fast, not easy, but honest. Word spread, the way it always does, that the land was claimed and defended, not by threat, but by resolve. Ilara learned the rhythms of the place. Flint learned the stillness of staying. One evening, months later, they sat on the porch watching the sun set alow. Ilara rested against him, breaths easy and sure. She lifted the canteen they shared, smiling as she took a careful sip. "Slowly," she said, teasing now. Flint smiled back. "That's how you keep breathing." The land stretched wide before them, hard and beautiful, and this time it felt lighter. The wind did not stop all at once. It eased, little by little, as if the land itself was calming down after holding its breath too long. Flint stayed where he was, knife still in hand, eyes fixed on the canyon mouth until he was certain the riders were gone for good. Only then did he let his shoulders drop. Only then did he turn fully toward Ilara. She was still against the rock, rain-soaked and shaking, but her eyes were open and clear. She looked at him the way someone looks at daylight after a long night, like it might vanish if she blinked too hard. "You're still here," she said. "So are you," Flint answered. That seemed to matter more than anything else. He knelt beside her, this time without urgency, driving his hands. He checked her breathing again, felt the steadiness returning. He wrapped her tighter against the cold that followed the storm, then waited until her shaking slowed. They stayed there longer than needed, letting the danger settle behind them. When Flint finally lifted her, she did not fight him. She trusted his arms now, without question. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck, real and present. The walk out of the canyon was slow. The ground was slick, the air heavy with the smell of wet stone. Flint spoke to her the whole way, not because she was fading, but because the sound of a steady voice had become part of survival itself. She answered when she could, sometimes only with a squeeze of his sleeve. At the creek cabin, Flint set her down with care. The place was small and plain, but it held warmth, and warmth mattered. He built the fire higher, boiled water, cleaned her wound properly this time. Ilara watched him through half-lidded eyes, noticing the quiet focus in his movements, the way he never rushed, and never hesitated. "Why did you stop?" she asked after a while. "You could have kept moving. Hunters like you usually do." Flint tied off the bandage and leaned back on his heels. "I was tired of walking past things that mattered," he said. "Didn't know it until I found you." She absorbed that in silence. Outside, the creek ran steady, unchanged by the violence that had passed nearby. Ilara slept then, a deep and honest sleep, the kind that heals instead of steals. Flint stayed awake, listening to every sound, guarding the door like the night still owed him something. Morning came soft. Ilara woke with pain, yes, but also strength. Real strength. She drank water without help. She sat up on her own. When Flint handed her food, she ate like someone planning to live. Over the next days, the story of what happened settled into something clear. The men who had followed her were part of a group that preyed on lone claims, especially those held by women. They relied on fear and isolation. They relied on no one standing in their way. They had not planned on Flint. Ilara healed slowly, but well. Each day she walked a little farther, stood a little longer. Flint showed her how to read the land differently, how to notice signs before danger arrived. She showed him how to plan ahead, how to build something meant to last instead of something meant to move. When the time came to return to her claim, Flint walked beside her, leading the horse, watching the horizon. Nothing followed them. No dust clouds, no distant riders, just open land and quiet promise. The claim felt different now. Not smaller, not larger, but real. Ilara stood there, hands on her hips, breathing it in. The land did not reject her. It waited. "They thought I was weak," she said. Flint nodded. "People confuse being alone with being weak." "You're not alone either," she said. It was not a question. They worked together without saying they would. The cabin rose piece by piece. Boards cut straight, corners set firm. Neighbors came by once word spread, cautious at first, then respectful. No one challenged the claim again. Stories travel fast in frontier land, especially stories about hunters who do not walk away. Weeks turned into months. Ilara's scar faded from angry red to pale white, a line that marked survival instead of loss. She grew stronger, more certain. Flint learned how to rest without feeling like the ground might disappear beneath him. Some evenings they talked about the past. Others they let silence do the work. Both felt right. One night, as the fire burned low, Ilara held the canteen between them. She took a slow drink, then passed it to Flint. "Funny," she said. "Something so simple nearly decided everything." Flint smiled faintly. Simple things usually do. She leaned into him, head against his shoulder. "I thought strength meant never needing help." "And now?" he asked. "And now I know it means knowing when to hold on." The land around them lay quiet and wide. Coyotes called in the distance. The stars spread clean and bright overhead. Nothing rushed them. Nothing threatened. Flint watched the horizon out of habit, then let his gaze settle back where it belonged. Ilara's breathing was steady, easy. The sound of someone who no longer feared closing her eyes. Freedom still weighed plenty. So did love. But some weight was meant to be carried together. The frontier did not soften for anyone. It never would. But on that land, under that sky, two people who had refused to let go, built something that could stand against it. And that was enough.